It is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with Heather Lofthouse and yours truly, Robert Reich. Heather, things are happening so fast.
That's the point.
That is the point. It is the point. I mean, this is blitzkrieg. They want to do it so fast that we're overwhelmed. We're all we can't even concentrate on what's happening.
And
so
in
terms of what we do here, what are we going to concentrate on?
Let's concentrate on Trump
taking
on Harvard, China, and the Supreme Court.
Well, that's
a lot to unpack.
That's interesting because Harvard and China and the Supreme Court are all huge institutions and countries, and Trump is taking them all on. And
they're taking him on.
Yes. And this could be his last stand because you can't just take these, you can't Harvard is the biggest institution, the number one institution by wealth and by influence and power in higher education. And China, hello? And the Supreme Court. This is, I have this mental image of Trump as a mad king surrounded by his lackeys, and the lackeys are rooting him on and saying, go, sir, president, go out, go, get China, get Harvard,
and
get
doing worshiping
the Supreme Court. And they're kind of edging him on. And he is so filled with his own power and rage and his own mad king sickness that he just might do it.
And overconfidence.
And overreach.
Yep.
Overconfidence and overreach on each of these.
Well, so let's dig into it. So Harvard, last time we had a coffee.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure what had happened. Oh, Harvard had said, we are not going to follow what you're asking.
Yes.
We are not going to concede.
Yes. And this is very, very important because Harvard was the first major university. Columbia had surrendered to Trump. Other universities in Columbia's wake were caving. They didn't want to lose their federal funding. And if they had, and they're all appealing, and it's illegal for Trump to use funds that are intended for one purpose by Congress to try to get his purposes done. But Alan Garber, the president of Harvard, said, no, we are not going, and he said it very explicitly, very clearly, we are not going to do Trump's bidding. And that gave more backbone to other universities. I mean, Columbia, 2 days later, said, well, we're rethinking it. We're going to be tougher.
And what was the Mad King's response?
And the Mad King, the Mad King is having tantrums. The Mad King, with regard to Harvard, immediately said, we're going to take away $2 billion of your funding, $2 billion. And then he has threatened to use the IRS to go after Harvard's tax-exempt status. Now, remember, the ostensible reason that Trump is giving for all of this is anti-Semitism at Harvard and some of these other institutions. But we know that he's also going after diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. He's also going after transgender students who are athletes, who are
he's also blown up science.
And that's right. And he's going after science generally. So it's after wokeism. I mean, this is
quote unquote.
This is the notion, the absurd notion that these universities are somehow in the camp of the left. And that is, I think, going to be Trump's undoing because Harvard University, unlike the others, has an enormous endowment, $54 billion.
Right.
It has very influential and powerful alumni. Contributions to Harvard are increasing dramatically in the wake of all of this.
Right. That's because people are saying, we agree with what you did. I do think it was surprising in some ways, right? And also invigorating. I mean, to see Harvard take that stance was incredible.
And absolutely. I think had it not, the whole university system would have ended up, trying to appease the Mad King. And once you try to appease, there's no end to it. But Harvard, by standing up, Harvard is setting an example. Harvard is saying, No, you don't have to appease the Mad King.
But also, so I think it's courage, and we'll talk about that. But I also think they have his number. I mean, they get that he is not a highly intelligent, strategic leader.
I think they do. I think they also understand that Trump is so impulsive that he will do whatever the next thing occurs to him, or whatever the person who comes to him last is going to say. So he's not a strategic thinker. And they understand they're dealing with an egomaniac, a kind of, a crazed narcissist. And so what you do with a crazed narcissist is you set limits.
Right. And when he's going to say he's winning, even when he's not winning, and they're going to keep going forward, right?
Yes. And this is the theme with Harvard and China, and we'll get to China in a moment, and the Supreme Court, because he's taking all of them on. And when he discovers that he can't win, he's going to try to save face. He'll say he did win. He'll look for off-ramps. He'll blame somebody else, and he will claim victory. I mean, this is his MO.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about China, because he has now said, we are in negotiation.
We are in negotiation with China.
Allegedly.
After putting tariffs of 145% on China. I mean, that is basically trying to decouple China, the Chinese economy, from the U.S. economy. You have the two biggest economies in the world in terms of trade trying to decouple. I mean, you're talking about direct investment, global companies that have huge markets in China and assembly operations that they actually feed into their American operations. We began to see the results of all of this in terms of the bond markets and the stock market. And I think that some of the people around Trump got scared, including the Treasury Secretary, who went to Trump and said, you've got to do something. So Trump, again, to try to save face, he says, well, this wasn't really about setting tariffs. This was about negotiating.
Right.
It's all about negotiating. And we'll give it a 3-month break. With China, though, those Chinese tariffs are still there.
And they retaliated.
And they
have his measure as well. They know what they're doing.
They do know what they're doing. And Trump can't win. I mean, just like he can't win with Harvard, he cannot win with China.
But can we just take it to its logical conclusion, even though I don't really want to, is that it's a lose-lose. I mean, he's not going to win. So what's going to happen? I mean, where are we going to end up? The tariffs will divide ours by 2 and they'll divide theirs by 2?
No, I think where we end up is a lose-lose. You're absolutely right. But the question is, who loses bigger? And I think the United States loses bigger because American companies are really global companies. They don't have any patriotism. It's not that, they're out to make as much money as possible. Chinese companies are different. Chinese companies are basically partly there because they want to improve the living standards of everybody in China and the power of the Chinese. And so we're dealing with different systems. And in terms of a global economy and American companies embedded in a global economy, those American companies will find other ways of getting their supplies and getting their components and getting their assemblies done.
Right. But it is, I mean, even people I know, who have certain jobs that are designers for companies and other things like that, they said everything is changing. I mean, we can't get any of our imports. We can't get any of the products we need to make our.
Absolutely, Heather. I mean, it's chaos. And chaos itself is an impediment to these giant economies. I mean, nobody's going to invest. You talk about manufacturing investment. Nobody's going to make any major investments in a firm, in a plant, or anything that is major or big, because you don't know the future.
Right. We talked about this last week.
And Trump keeps changing his mind.
Okay, so the Supreme Court.
Yes, number 3.
Where do things stand?
Harvard, China, Supreme Court. This is his third showdown war. Well, it's interesting. I think that the Supreme Court really does not want to get to a point where they see that Trump is saying, I don't care what the Supreme Court has said. I'm going to do what I want to do. This is what J.D. Vance, has been egging him on to do. It would be suicide for a president because the public really does believe that the courts matter, and it would be tipping America into dictatorship. I mean, clearly. But it would also be suicidal for the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court has no power in and of itself, obviously. That's what the Federalists, the founders who talked about the Supreme Court, no power of the purse, no power, no army. And so it is all power by just simply trust in the Supreme Court. This is a dangerous showdown. And the showdown is going to happen, I think, right now, or it's happening right now as we speak, over the decision by the Trump administration to basically take this individual, Abrego Garcia.
Yeah, Kilmar.
Abrego Garcia.
From Maryland.
To abduct him with no trial, with no evidence, with no process at all, and put him into a prison in El Salvador that a district court judge had said you must not. You are not allowed to do this. The district court decision came years ago. And in fact, they even admitted, the Immigration Service admitted error. They said they should not. Administrative error. They should not do this. But they did. And then to just almost rub the Supreme Court's face in its own impotence, you have on Monday, there's Trump in the Oval Office with the president of El Salvador, what is it, Bukele? Bukele. And they're just having a lovely time. They're having a lovely conversation. And Trump is saying, well, I can't do anything. And Bukele is saying, I really can't do anything.
Yeah, as they high five.
But it's very clear that if this stands, none of us is safe because it's just their allegation. It's just Trump regime's allegation that this person should be in a prison, a brutal prison in El Salvador.
But so you keep saying it would mean and it could mean and when it happened. I mean, when are we? So there's been a rebuke, right, this week. So a district court said this is not okay. But when do we get to the point? Aren't we inching closer and closer?
We are inching so close because the Supreme Court said you must facilitate. Facilitate is that word, the verb, facilitate. It doesn't mean you can just sit in your chair. Facilitate means you've got to do something. And the administration, the regime is saying, no, we don't have to do anything. It says facilitate. And it was interpreted by the White House counsel as 9-0. You can just do nothing. No, facilitate is an active verb. You have to do something.
Interpreted, I think, is a generous term.
Yep.
I think it was lied and put on its head. I mean, it was 9-0 against what the administration has done, not 9-0, feel free to do anything you like.
Exactly. But just like Harvard and like China, you have this confrontation with the Supreme Court. And it's getting closer and closer. And people around Trump are egging him on. And maybe there's a little brain inside Trump that is saying, I don't want to,
little hands, little brain.
If I go too far, maybe I ought to seek an off-ramp. Maybe, as with Harvard and China, there ought to be a little bit of a way in which I can save face. But we'll see. I mean, it's getting very close. We are just a hair's breadth away from an outright dictatorship.
And ICE is getting more aggressive, Trump's ICE, and going after, so many individuals.
And many of those
including citizens.
Including citizens.
Yep, I know.
Including citizens. This is the most important part of that little White House dance in the Oval Office between the president of El Salvador and Trump, where Trump says, and he says it off. He thinks he's off
hot mic,
off camera and off mic. He says, I need more room because we're going to go after homegrown next?
Yep, the homegrowns.
Well, hello, you're homegrown.
I know.
I'm homegrown.
Yep.
Who's next?
Well, the Supreme Court is going to review a case about birthright citizenship, which is another thing that I personally did not see coming, except that we all kind of did.
Yeah, now that's in a slightly different category, but it is going to be reviewed, and the 14th Amendment makes it very clear. Very clear. There's no debate. The 14th Amendment says clearly, if you're born in the United States, you have citizenship.
Right. Jus soli. That's the term. Latin.
Yes.
The soil.
You were a Latin scholar.
A scholar is, I took 2 years of it.
Well, that makes
Wasn't great.
You took 2 more years of Latin than I did.
You didn't take Latin?
No, I
Oh.
didn't.
What'd you take?
I took French. I speak French.
Oh,
With the
sorry,
French
everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. This
So
is going to be scary. So
this
that's one we're also watching.
This is, but what I want everybody to understand, all of us, is how close we are right now to these confrontations that are lose-lose confrontations, big lose-lose confrontations.
Well, what's the logical conclusion? Okay, so here we are. We're still in the midst and holding our breath. So it feels like, to me, Trump is defying everything, but still things are being appealed. So maybe we're not quite at the finish line of the marathon.
Well, in terms of the Supreme Court, we are very close because the Supreme Court has said facilitate with regard to the American
Yep.
from Maryland
Yep.
who is in El Salvador
Yep.
without charges. The birthright citizenship, yes, it's going to come very, very quickly and close. There are a lot of other cases that are coming up to the Supreme Court. Now, the Trump regime has so far basically neglected the district courts and said, well, we're not bound by them. We don't care.
Right.
They're acting as if the district court rulings don't matter. But those district court rulings matter when they get to the Supreme Court. And that's the showdown. That's the final showdown.
But so the U.S. Marshal Service exists,
Yes.
right? And DOJ is in charge of them.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I mean, if Trump is in contempt and the whole regime is in contempt,
Well, wait a minute.
and there's two kinds of contempt, right? Help us through this.
Well,
Ugh.
you just jumped to contempt. Well, if a court, it could be a district court, it could be a court of appeals, it could conceivably be finally on appeal, the Supreme Court finds that there is criminal contempt.
Right.
That is, officers of the United States intentionally, willfully decided they are not going to obey a Supreme Court ruling.
Right. And it has already happened, and it was criminal.
And yes, and because it is willful,
Yep.
because it is intentional, then you're in the midst of the worst constitutional crisis you can imagine. Then your issue about the marshals, the U.S. Marshals, who are they loyal to? Are they loyal to their employers at the Justice Department, or can the Supreme Court deputize marshals and then have them go where? To the Justice Department or someplace else and arrest people? We're not going to get there, Heather. It would be,
You promise me?
well, I can't promise anything because it is so crazy.
Mm.
I lived through, and many of you lived through the Nixon years.
How does this compare, though? Is your anxiety level today compared to your anxiety level when you were living through
Well,
Watergate?
it's both anxiety and anger and outrage. It's worse now. It is worse now because Tricky Dick Nixon did some awful stuff, and he stretched the Constitution, and he was one of the worst presidents we've ever had. But he at least had some sense of what he was doing and some balance and some principles. I mean, there weren't.
I was going to say.
You had to dig pretty
Right.
deeply. No, but this is much more dangerous.
Mm. Okay. So that's the logical conclusion. So we're going to have to wait and see, is what you're telling me.
But I don't think we're going to have to wait long. I think what we really are going to see with regard to Harvard and China and the Supreme Court is these off-ramps. Trump using whatever excuse he can to blame them or to blame somebody else and to say, I won.
Right.
I, Trump, won this contest, even though he didn't.
And Van Hollen, Senator Van Hollen of Maryland, went down and said, I just want proof of life, right? I just want to see him with my own eyes.
Yeah.
take a message back.
You're talking about Garcia.
Yeah.
Yes, and he did, and it was staged by
For sure.
the
government.
El Salvador.
Yeah.
But where does that leave us? I mean, we still have a man who has not been charged with anything, and he's in a prison that is notorious.
And do you see what the horrible, this is the kind of stuff that floors me. So the official White House Twitter account said, here, I fixed it for you, New York Times. And they took the article they had written saying that he was wrongfully, I don't think they used the verb kidnapped, but taken. And they redid it and they crossed it out.
Oh, I saw it. Michael, can we get that? Because that's, just put it up there so everybody can see this. This is what adolescents would do. This is what a 13-year-old kid.
I know, it's like the mustache on the photo in the yearbook.
Yeah, I mean, this is not just undignified. This is stupid. This is the kind of prank, malicious prank that a kid
So
would get
cruel.
into. But remember, we're dealing with institutions. We're dealing with the government of the United States. We're dealing with we're not at war with each other, or at least I don't think we're at war. This is not a civil war.
But how, I mean, so there are so many adjectives we're using to describe this, but sophomoric and childlike, it feels like a bunch of male, with all due respect,
this is
teenagers.
Yes, it does feel like testosterone poisoned young teenage boys who are just delighted. They're excited. They're in power. They can go and do anything they want. And I would include Vance, and I would include Vogt, who's the OMB person,
Miller,
and Stephen Miller, definitely, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I mean, think of all of that testosterone in the same place, and each of them egging each other on, and Elon Musk, obviously.
And you've been in a lot of White Houses.
Yes, I have.
So in my, again, ignorant, naive head, I would think that, there's a team, right? And some on the team are a little more risk-seeking, and some are more risk-averse, and some would be saying, maybe don't do that. I don't think there is one person saying maybe don't do that.
No.
And you think it's the exact opposite, right? I mean, it's
I think that there is a competition to see who can be the most blatant and aggressive.
Marco Rubio's in the contest.
Marco Rubio, yes, and I think the difference between the first Trump and second Trump administration, the first one, he was surrounded by people who said no to him and understood how to manage Trump. Now he has surrounded himself with people who are
different
egging
vice
him
president
on. Yes, and a completely different vice president. And these are not just enablers. These are encouragers. These are people who want him to take bigger and bigger risks and gain more and more power. And of course, they're dealing, again, with a malignant narcissist who wants more and more power. At least part of him does. He doesn't want to be embarrassed. He doesn't want to be ashamed.
He doesn't want to be seen as losing.
Humiliated.
Right.
No, that's right. And that's the balance in his head.
Now, we haven't even mentioned that he's also going up against the Fed. I mean, we're at the beginning, it feels. But so Trump said this week, Jerome Powell can't get out of here soon enough, or whatever he said.
Well, Jerome Powell has a 14-year term, and he was put in office by
a long term
by Trump.
Yep.
The reason that you have long terms for Fed chairs,
yes, specifically,
and the reason the Fed has independence is so its decisions, mostly about interest rates, have credibility in the market. If the Fed didn't have independence, if the Fed chair would come and go and would be another puppet of Trump,
or anyone else,
there would be no credibility. Markets would say, well, interest rates may be going down, but I think there's going to be huge inflation, and we would have no controls at all.
Right. So its independence is paramount, and it feels like Jerome Powell is holding on to the independence.
He has said again and again, I'm not leaving. I am not leaving. I promise I'm not leaving. But his term of office is over in 2026. So even if Trump does everything he can to embarrass and humiliate Jerome Powell, Jerome Powell is going to be there. Heather, in the late 20th century, when I was in the White House, we were instructed not to say anything negative about the chief of the Fed, the chair of the Fed. It was then Alan Greenspan, and I wanted to say some things about
bet
Alan
you had some
Greenspan.
opinions.
But no, we couldn't even say it because it was thought to be not only unseemly, but also dangerous in
Right,
terms
for the
of
economy.
the economy.
So what's going to happen with that? We'll see. So 2026 reminds me that there are midterms. So on a bad day, there's no crying on the clutch. So let's not get into how bad it's getting.
No, it is getting bad.
It's getting bad. But so even on a bad day, I think the midterms are coming. It's 560, whatever, 3 something days till the midterms.
Couldn't come fast enough.
But so I keep thinking about the midterms. Do you think about the midterms?
All the time. I dream about the midterms.
You dream about the midterms
really.
because
I
then,
daydream and night dream about
even
midterms.
if just one chamber,
Yeah.
2 would be fabulous.
If we got if the Democrats got control at least of one chamber, and had a good majority, a working majority.
Right.
I mean, I'm not talking about Manchin and Sinema. I'm talking about a majority you could count on.
Right.
That would make all the difference. Then Trump would be constrained. He will still try anything he can, and if Democrats had both chambers, he might be impeached,
Right.
And he could be thrown out of office. But just one chamber would actually make a huge difference.
One theme you've been hitting on in your many Substacks, courage versus cowardice. And so it's been, and you know that I took a leadership class with you, which, by the way, I'm trying to convince you in your copious free time to do a new version of.
Yes, thank you very much.
I really want that to happen. It was such an excellent course. But so leadership.
Leadership is about courage. It is about courage.
And it's part and parcel of being a leader, right? You are going to be tested. You said this from day one.
Yeah. Now, again, you don't want to be irresponsible in terms of your leadership. You've got to bring people along to the extent you possibly can. But when Alan Garber at Harvard says no
right.
To Trump, that is an exercise in courageous leadership. And this is the kind of leadership, I mean, historically, the person who I keep on going back to is Joseph Welch, who
this was so great
before your time.
Yes, but I know. I mean, we all.
But
study
I remember
him.
I was a little boy. I was 6 years old, 1954, maybe 8 years old, and I was sitting with my father watching the Army McCarthy hearings, and it was the height of the communist witch hunt, and Joe McCarthy was, just railing and railing and railing, and he would wreck people's careers, even just accusing them of being communist. And at one point in those hearings, well, maybe let's see if we can get the clip and watch.
Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
I know this hurts you, Mr. Welch.
I'll say it hurts.
May I say, Mr. Chairman, as a point of personal privilege, I'd like to finish this.
Senator, I think it hurts you too, sir.
I'd like to finish this.
Now, so Joseph Welch is my hero.
Talk about courage.
And I started last week. I said, well, the Joseph Welch Award this week goes to Alan Garber and Harvard University. And I got this loveliest message from Joseph Welch's granddaughter. And she just idolized her grandfather.
Pop! I know, you posted it on your Substack. I loved it. And she sent that photo.
And she sent a really lovely photo of her grandfather, Joseph Welch.
Lifting her up by the ears.
And that's not, I mean, he was doing it playfully. But
it was so special. And she said, keep up what you're doing. And he would have been so proud. And he actually rode, that he rode to school on the bare barebacked on a horse because his brother was the one in the saddle. So he was behind the saddle going to the one-room schoolhouse where his brother was the teacher. And that man, Joseph Welch, ended up going to Harvard Law. So it was particularly touching that it is Harvard who is standing up. Was according to the granddaughter. But that was a nice moment of the week.
One of the very few.
Two, maybe.
But contrast Joseph Welch with the appeaser. I mean, historically, in recent, at least some people's memories, you have Neville Chamberlain in 1939, who said to Adolf Hitler, "Yes, I'll believe you. You have reassured me. I will believe you. We will not do anything here."
Capitulation 101.
That's right. Neville Chamberlain was the Prime Minister of Britain at that time. And that surrender, the point is, you cannot capitulate or appease a dictator.
A tyrant.
A tyrant. I mean, there is no appeasing a tyrant because the tyrant takes your appeasement and becomes even a larger tyrant and sucks it up. That's when the law firms, these awful, terrible law firms, I mean, they may be good law firms, but in terms of their moral principle, they say to Trump, yes, whatever you want. And the law firms themselves lose their integrity. They lose their independence. Paul Weiss was the firm that the Trump regime, first of all, issued demands to, and it relented. It surrendered. Well, Trump continues to make demands. It's the same thing as Colombia. Once you surrender, there's no end to the demands that the tyrant will make on you, on your own institution.
Right, but over 500 law firms did come together, right, and they friend of the court.
Yes, and they supported Perkins Coie,
yeah,
which stood up and got the Joseph Welch Award in my little award system for standing up to Trump.
Yeah.
Yes, there is still courage in American law. Not enough.
Right.
And the big law firms, nearly not enough. But there is some.
Right.
But Heather, the point is that wherever you look in our system, our social structure, our civil society, you find that a bullying president, a malignant narcissist bullying president,
power hungry,
surrounded by power hungry adolescents, is going to look for ways of bullying you, finding bullies. I mean, look at the museums, look at the libraries that he's now trying to bully. I mean, every institution of civil society,
universities, nonprofits,
is now really vulnerable, and it is incumbent on every one of us and every one of our institutions to hold the line, to say no, even if it is costly to do it. That's what courage is all about. Courage is costly. Yeah. I mean, Harvard is going to pay a price. Every university that says no, every law firm that says no, every institution that says no, every museum that says no is going to pay a price. But the price is worth it, not only in terms of the integrity of that institution, but in terms of the integrity of the system. Because every institution that says no is saving the system.
So is a movement afoot? Is a reckoning coming?
Well, it's remarkable that in fewer than 100 days, we have come to the point we have come to. That is the absolute tip of dictatorship and tyranny. And I think America is rising up. I mean, the demonstrations are getting larger and larger. Bernie Sanders and AOC, when they went to Los Angeles just like last weekend, 36,000 people, 36,000.
More than he's ever seen.
And in Denver before it had been 34,000. I mean, these are mammoth rallies.
Right.
And it just shows the extent to which people are afraid, but also angry and outraged. And I think that we're going to see more of this.
Well, there are protests and actions happening today because it's the anniversary, right, of the Lexington and Concord
250th.
It's the semi-quincentennial.
Semi-quincentennial?
I say semi. quincentennial. You can say
I would
semi-quincentennial.
like to say quarter millennial.
It's a synonym.
But it's easier to say.
Yeah, but
But look at 250 years ago at Lexington and Concord. Think of the
the
courage.
Revolutionary War began.
Think of the courage. The
I
shock
mean, really.
how heard round the world. It was because of a tyrant, a mad king. I mean, literally a mad king was sending his troops to round up Americans who were trying to maintain the rule of law.
And Paul Revere, were you friends with?
Yeah, well,
were you all close?
I dated his not his wife, his sister.
You dated his sister.
No, his sister Sally Revere. I'm not going to tell you about that
No,
because it was just.
You revered her.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you really did.
Yeah.
No, but so he was a patriot. I mean, the definition, right?
He was
Rode
the
at
definition.
night.
Yeah.
Rode at night. Then these battles occur.
Yeah.
Then we have America.
Well, then we have, yes.
Can we hearken back to this, please?
Well, then a year later, after the Lexington and Concord, we have the Declaration of Independence. And, I mean, think of the courage that it took. Not only Lexington and Concord, but also the courage of these people who really felt some loyalty to Britain. They felt, that was their responsibility. But at the same time, they knew that they had to make the break. And if they didn't make the break, there would be no freedom. Everybody would be subjected to this mad king.
And the risks were...
But the risks were huge. They would lose their lives.
They didn't have lawyers on speed dial.
They didn't? No, I don't think they did.
No, and they didn't know that they could post on Blue Sky and have everyone give them likes.
It was slightly more primitive, and it took them a long time to get from Boston to wherever they were going.
Yeah, exactly.
Philadelphia.
But so people are inspired by this, and there is a movement. I mean, people are showing up today.
Great. I think it's important. It's important to have a kind of a national civil or civic uprising.
Yep.
I mean, this is what we have to have, Heather.
Even David Brooks called for it.
David Brooks. Now, David Brooks is not somebody, he's a columnist in the New York Times. He's not somebody that I've ever quoted before, but I did quote him on this, a national civic uprising, because the Republicans in Congress are totally, they are intimidated. Lisa Murkowski.
I saw that.
I was moved and angered by her admission. And she said, yes, you wouldn't believe the intimidation. I mean, the degree to which people are afraid.
To speak up.
To speak up. She was talking, I assume she was talking about Republicans, and she was talking about the Senate. These are our representatives. These are the people who we rely on. To speak for the people. And if they are intimidated and they are afraid to speak up, we are certainly, all of us, vulnerable to this mad king.
And you went on a couple days ago, you went to UC Berkeley, and we can put the link in the description, but you had a powerful speech where you said, Harvard has said no, and Berkeley should say no, and universities have to come together, and we have to be defiant in the face of tyranny.
Yeah, and the problem for universities, the problem for law firms, the problem for all these institutions to coming together is a collective action problem. That is, it's like the prisoner's dilemma. It's easier for them as individual institutions to feel like if they do a cost-benefit analysis, the costs are going to be overwhelming, and they shouldn't be courageous. Right. But if they are together, if they think in terms of solidarity, and I'm not even talking just the universities, but all of these institutions of civil society,
and these people. All of us, the community members.
All of us.
Common good.
If we understand that solidarity generates courage, we have to come together.
I think it's hard. I mean, so we have a loneliness epidemic. We know that. But it feels so atomized. I mean, even though I feel like I have a serious sense of community, and a community around me, but it's still, it feels so individualistic still. It's hard. And that's what you have mentioned in that David Brooks article. basically it's got to be a group. It's got to be the collective.
Well, I think that one of the reasons that people are attracted to a strongman, and this goes for Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin and Donald Trump, is that atomized issue that they are afraid. They feel vulnerable as individuals. Society doesn't offer them enough protection or enough enough protection from the bullies of society, the economic bullies in America, for example. And I think that it's only through coming together, literally, figuratively, that we can gain the courage we need to take on the bullies.
Right.
And this is fundamentally important. If there's a silver lining, and I know I've said this before, Heather, and your
It's
eyes
very
are going to
dull. The silver
your
is
eyes
not
are
even
gonna
shining
glaze,
a little bit.
but this is so important. What we must learn from this horrible chapter of American history is that our institutions matter. To treat them as they have been treated for years, the money flowing into politics, as if money is free speech, as if corporations are people, which the Supreme Court decided these are so fundamentally antithetical to the institutional integrity we need to avoid a Trump in the future, that I hope we learn. I hope we learn our lesson.
And I hope that we continue to explain what's happening. There is a purpose behind it. Step one of divide and conquer is divide.
Absolutely.
That's what's happening.
Well, this is out of the fascist playbook.
Yeah.
I mean, you want people to be angry at each other. You want the Democrats and Republicans to be shouting at each other. You want people to distrust each other.
Yep.
Because then they don't.
And countries.
And yes, and
Yep.
countries too. Because then they suspect each other as being the reason for all of their problems, and they don't look upward and see where all the money and power have actually gone, to the oligarchy, to a relatively handful of people who are smirking, who are sitting back and saying, oh, this is great, just more and more anger and more discord is exactly what we need. Well, it's just the opposite.
Okay. Well, I'm wearing black because I'm in mourning for something. Democracy?
Democracy. Let's
end on a
positive
on a
democracy
toast.
note. But look, the forces of progress, the forces of the future are mobilizing, and we are mobilizing. You are mobilizing, and Heather, thank you once again.
Thank you.
For all of your mobilization.
Thank you, Bob.
Your activism, your energy. And thank you all again for everything you are doing. You are going to be, and already are, being called upon to take a more active role in our society than perhaps you have ever been called upon. And it is critically important you do so. Thank you for doing so. We will see you
in a week.
In a week, next week.
Mr. McCarthy, I will not discuss this further with you. You have sat within 6 feet of me and could have asked me about Fred Fisher. You have seen fit to bring it out, and if there is a God in heaven, it will do neither you nor your cause any good. I will not discuss it further. I will not ask Mr. Cohen any more witnesses. You, Mr. Chairman, may, if you will, call the next witness.